Good morning, warriors. How are we doing today? Yes, we are back. Warrior Fitness, men, women, warriors, overcome the obstacles of that's who we are and that's what we do. Great thing about being a warrior is we're looking to improve our health and fitness, our physique, and a lot of times that comes into the realm of hypertrophy or building muscle. But anything that can be done, people try to improve on, and they get to this place of where they think more is better, longer is better, and that's just not the case. And so we're going to refer over to some information. Recently, I've been seeing a number of people, a trend, specifically with older people, but I have seen it with younger people as well who get into health and fitness, and they're on the socials and they're doing the Instagram videos and the reels and all this stuff. And they'll do a repetition and then they'll hold it, and then the duration of the repetition, this guy does it for 2 to 3 seconds, and then it's 4 to 6, and then you got somebody who's holding the repetition and it takes them 10, 15. I saw one guy do 20-second repetition, and it just kind of hit me as being off, because there's a point of diminishing returns with everything. It's kind of like, if you have a migraine and the doctor gives you a prescription, it says 1 to 2 pills, and you take 2 pills, and then it's like, okay, in a while your migraine goes away. So you think in your head, well, if 2 pills is good, 6 pills has got to be even better. But that's not how it works. And unfortunately, what we end up seeing in health and fitness are people that get into this more is better. And so what I reference here when I was writing this was that we have this idea that people think more is better. So if doing 10 to 20 sets per muscle group is good, well, then 30, 40, 50 or more has got to be even better, right? I mean, that has to be, more is always better, because if you add more volume, you're going to get more. No, there's up to a point, and there's this point of diminishing returns. So you're going to think of it as like an investment. You put money into an investment, and you're going to get a certain amount of money back as interest, as a return on that investment. And then it gets to the point of where anymore you're not going to get a higher return, because your interest is the interest that you're getting. You're not going to get any more. You can put the percentage is still going to be the same. And the same applies for this. So when we talk about more is better, I've seen people who are fitness influencers, kind of the poor ones, the bad ones. I've seen people recommend 40 and 50 sets per muscle group. And it's like, obviously these people are idiots. And I am comfortable with saying that, if you're ignorant of the knowledge that comes with hypertrophy, then yeah, you're talking out of ignorance, you're an idiot. Where's your proof of this? Just because you say, or just because you look good doesn't equate that is true. And so that's why it's always great to look at studies through, PubMed, peer-reviewed articles, studies done by universities and their physiology departments or nutrition departments or whatever, that have strict protocols, that have double-blind testing, and so on and so forth. So, for example, when you look at the studies, you can find that anywhere from 20 to 30 sets per muscle group per week is pretty much the max that you want to hit when we're talking about hypertrophy, muscle protein synthesis, building muscle. Granted, your nutrition has got to be on point, and recovery also. But anything above that becomes junk volume. And there's some little discrepancy depending on what muscle groups, smaller muscle groups versus larger muscle groups like your chest or thighs, quads, whatever. There are some differences on that. But really, kind of as a rule of thumb, we can look at 20 to 30 sets per week is kind of the max that you should go for. And this is also dependent upon, the individual and their experience. If they're brand new to health and fitness, yeah, doing 20 to 30 sets per body part is not recommended at all. because you're going to overtax the central nervous system. You're going to get massive amounts of delayed onset muscle soreness. It's not going to be fun. There's going to be no positive benefits to that. So usually with brand new people, I recommend doing maybe 2 to 3 sets with maybe 2 or 3 exercises per body part or muscle group. And just kind of ease into it. Use the lighter weight, some higher repetitions, concentrate on form. Do not worry about pushing and doing the ego lifting. We hear about progressive overload. Yes, that's a thing, but you should have good form and you should be, have a good base of which to start from. Unfortunately, people will get into junk volume and it ends up, it's just a waste of time. The study showed this, that it's a waste of time, it's a waste of energy. I don't know, maybe if you don't have a life and it doesn't really matter. But you're not going to get back the return that you think you're going to get by doing, 40, 50, or 60 sets per muscle group. It's just a work of futility. Now, along with this, I've noticed on socials that, especially with the elders, because I'm a senior, I'm 56, and I've seen people that are in their 40s and 50s and even up into their 60s that are been exercising and they're influencers now and they're posting videos and reels and the Instagram videos or whatever. And it's gone from slow negatives to where you have the eccentric and the concentric. When you're doing a repetition, you bring the weight up and then, contract for 1 to 2 seconds, and then you go down in 3 to 4 seconds, maybe 6 seconds. So maybe the whole thing is maybe about, 4 to 8 seconds, whatever. But people have taken this and said, well, if that amount of time is good, then it's even better if we double or triple the time to do the duration of the repetition. So, so we get into that mentality of longer is better, more is better, and that's not the case. And so as I was drinking my morning latte, as I'm just about finishing up, and perusing the interwebs and looking over hypertrophy studies, I know it's weird. I'm retired and I have time to do that. I ran across this study that talks about the duration of repetitions. And the study is a meta-analysis of a bunch of other studies, and it comes to some really interesting conclusions of how they picked the studies that they did and how they came to the conclusions on a variety of different topics, and duration of the repetition is one of them. So I wanted to go over that. What we end up seeing is anywhere from 4 to 8 seconds is kind of a good thing, and that's usually what I recommend. 4 to 6 seconds on a repetition, with the slow negative. You'll get more muscle fiber engagement, recruitment of those muscle fibers, along with an elongated stretch of those muscle fibers of kind of like the chest or whatever it is. Having a weighted stretch, studies also show that is beneficial for muscle hypertrophy. So there's all these little tips and tricks that we're seeing as being found out by these studies that, I incorporate and I use, and I found, okay, yeah, this is really good. But this study, it ends up that longer isn't always better. So in other words, it becomes what I would call junk duration of a repetition. So there's no added benefits, and this study ended up showing that there's no added benefits of doing 10-second or longer repetitions. And I've seen the old guys. There's some old guys out there in their 60s and doing a dumbbell repetition, or they're working their tricep or whatever it is, doing some skull crushers, and it takes like 10, 15 seconds to do it. Oh, I concentrate on quality over quantity, and it's like you're stepping into that area of junk duration, and it's not helping you with maintaining muscle. It's not helping you, definitely not with hypertrophy, because there is that diminishing return. So I wanted to go over this, and I'll post a picture down below. But, actually, I think we could do this. We'll turn this around, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So here is what I ended up doing. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know if we're going to be able to see that. Now, let's try. Let's try this, because I made this graphic here. And we can kind of squeeze this down to where it actually fits in the screen. Maybe make it a little bit tiny smaller. Okay, so there we go. This is what I found out, and this is a screen capture picture of that study, and there is the link right down there. So it says repetition duration, training with loads lower than 80 to 85% of your 1 rep max allows the trainee to voluntarily modify the tempo of the lift, which is, you can, if you go lower than that, when you start getting into 80, 85, 90% of your 1 rep max, slowing down the repetition becomes really hard, and it's not a normal thing. So an action that reduces the velocity of the lift by increasing mechanical tension manifested by the muscle. So we talked about that, and he conducted a meta-analysis and observed similar gains in hypertrophy when the training repetition duration ranges from 5 to 8 seconds to concentric muscular failure. However, it was also observed that training to voluntary slow durations of 10 seconds per repetition is inferior to hypertrophy when it comes to that standpoint. The authors speculate the existence of a possible threshold velocity below which hypertrophy response is impaired, since it could not be suitable stimulus to recruit all motor units of a muscle. So this is really interesting. So from a practical perspective, a wide range of repetition durations can be used to stimulate hypertrophy. However, slow repetitions of around 10 seconds and more should be avoided. So yeah, in slow, slow is good, but slower isn't always better, and that's not the case. So we come up with 0.5 to 8 seconds is probably good for hypertrophy, but anything over, I would say, 8 seconds would just be a work of futility. So yeah, that's what we got going on when we're talking about muscle and hypertrophy and building. And so when you see people, the video that comes to mind is an older gentleman, I forget his name, but I think he's in his 60s. He looks really good for his age, but what he ends up doing is some exercises where the repetitions and the duration are hitting, 10, 12 seconds, and it's like, you don't need that for maintaining. 4 to 6 seconds on a repetition, on a slow negative and all of that stuff, do it in 4 to 6 seconds. That is good for maintaining muscle. You don't need to do 10, 15, 20 seconds. There is no added benefit to adding that junk duration is what I'm calling it. There's junk volume, and I would propose, based on this meta-analysis of repetition and the duration, that you get to a point of where it just becomes junk time. It's the duration. You're not going to get anything above and beyond by going 10, 15, or 20 seconds by doing a repetition. It's just not worth it. I guess if you don't have a life and you're retired, I'm retired, and you just have time to spare, then yeah, go ahead and do it. But just realize that you're not going to build more muscle by doing a 15-second repetition. It just doesn't work that way. And so, for example, we see exercises where you have people that are doing like curls, and they come up, and then they have the other barbell that comes up, and then they'll do, they'll hold this one out at here, and then they keep that, and then they'll do, their 5 or 10 repetitions with this here, and then they'll stop and they'll hold this, and then they'll do the other one, and they'll do their 10 repetitions or whatever it is, maintaining tension on that muscle group while holding it while you're doing these 10. Well, there is a point of where that added stress is good, and that added muscular tension can create some micro muscle tears, but eventually you come to a place of diminishing returns. And this study that as I was actually looking at something else in this study, and then I ran across this as I was reading through it, and I was like, wow, hey, this is what I've been seeing, with some older folks and even some younger folks that want to be fitness influencers. And, encouraging people to get fit and exercise, and oh, this is what I do to grow muscle. And it's like, no, there's a point of where longer is not always better. So I wanted to talk about that. And if I had known back in the day what I know now based off of studies, if I had a time machine and I could go back in time with what I know now, the gains that I could make, the recovery, I would have better recovery, I would have more muscle gains, my attention on nutrition and how to bulk and lean bulk and cut would have been invaluable. So hopefully through highlighting information like this, and for the people that are watching, this will minimize your learning curve. So instead of spending and wasting years or decades on information, the bro science, now we have studies to where we can actually have a definitive answer and show with repeatable results, with double-blind studies, with a control group, with doing, MRIs and all kinds of, muscle biopsies and all this stuff. We can really get to a place of where we can find this is reliable information, and then we can start tailoring our workouts to something that is based on what actually works, instead of just trying to do stuff that doesn't make sense. Case in point, there was a video I saw this morning after I was reading and in perusing, because I get up at about 5 every day, that there is this guy and he was doing tricep exercises and he was using like 110 pounds and he's sitting and he's got the weight behind him and it's 110 pounds. And his repetition is kind of like this. It's like maybe quarter reps or whatever. He's not getting a full range of motion. He's not getting a weighted stretch, elongating that, the tricep muscle group all the way down. If you do with like a one arm extension, with definitely a lighter weight, you go down as far as you can. And then as you come up, you're concentrating, you're really focusing on that contraction at the top, and then you go down, do a slow negative and go down and really get a good stretch. But this guy was, somebody gave this old guy a smartphone and now he's posting videos and he's a fitness guru, but his arms they're not that big. And that's the problem, is you think that more is better. Well, if 50 pounds is good, well then 60, 70, 80, 100 pounds has got to be even better, right? I'll get massive. No, especially if you have the incorrect form and you're doing quarter reps, you're not even doing half reps. You're really doing a disservice because you're investing on something that you're trying to grow and get a return on, and you're cutting yourself short by doing a quarter repetition. You're not doing a weighted stretch. It's really a work in futility, and I'll be honest with you, I have done that exact same thing. And, I was in the Army, I was young, I was stupid. You see people in the gym lifting weights and it's like, well, I'm going to lift more than he can. And you start ego lifting, instead of having your elbows close in as you go up, this guy is like this. Obviously, you can see his shoulders coming into work. He's really straining his back. So he's recruiting a lot more muscle groups to lift that weight, especially the shoulders. And what that ends up doing is you're taking the stress off of the triceps, you're putting it onto other muscle groups, so you're really doing a disservice. I had hit a plateau where I was at, and as I was studying and saying, okay, there's got to be a reason for this. My nutrition is on point. I'm doing these exercises. I'm not getting any growth. I'm hitting, I'm stalling at this point here. And I wanted to get 18-inch arms. So I'm like, okay, I need to look at studies, at least search for studies and try to find studies about, how I can spur on more muscle growth. So I found out weighted stretching. I found out about stretching the muscle, so example, like with the tricep extension, or doing flies that really stretches. When you stretch the muscle fibers, besides lifting the weight and creating micro muscle tears, as you stretch the muscle, that also creates micro muscle tears. So the more tears that you have, just on a Barney basic level, the more repair that's going to happen, and the more muscle fibers are going to be built, repaired, so on and so forth. So you have greater hypertrophy. I hope that makes sense. So when I saw that, and it's like, okay, so we need to concentrate more on a full range of motion in certain exercises, and especially as I was dealing, with the triceps and trying to get this to be bigger. 3 muscles here will make your arm bigger. You only have biceps, you only have 2. So you get more bang for your buck on the real estate of the triceps than you do the biceps. So when I started doing because I used to do what this guy was doing, had my elbows flared out as I'm really pushing the weight, it ends up, as you push up, you're really exercising the front delts. You're doing limited movement on the tricep exercise. And so I changed over, and what I ended up doing after looking at these studies and so on and so forth, what I ended up doing was overhead standing cable tricep extensions. So I have a line of force that's going in this direction. So I have a really good stretch that is pulling my arms back, which is really stretching this tricep. And then as I go forward, and then I contract as hard as I can, for 1 to 2 seconds. And then I do a slow negative for, like I said, about 4 to 6 seconds. And with that continued stretch, and at the end of the set, what I'll end up doing is a really slow negative, maybe 8 seconds, and then I'll just hold it to get more stretch on that tricep. And then what I ended up doing was taking like a dumbbell, and instead of doing some stupidly massive amount of 110 pounds or 50 pounds or whatever, I'm doing like 30 pounds behind, and then going up, contracting really hard, and doing that slow negative, going down as far as I can to this place here, and then going back up with 30 pounds. And then 1 or 2 sets of that, and then I have to drop down to 25 pounds and then maybe 20 pounds. When I started using weighted stretching and correct form and, working the muscle as it's meant to be worked at a natural line of movement, what I found is I got more muscle hypertrophy. So just to show you, and I've been working towards 18-inch arms, and it's 9:12 in the morning. It's my day off, and we'll see what we get here. What we're looking at there is just over 18 inches. So, that's pretty good. And I haven't hit the gym. Okay, I did a few dumbbells, curls with, this one. So we're looking at, over 18, almost 18 and a half. I was able to break that plateau of hypertrophy of where I've stalled at. And when I started using some of these ideas that I get from these studies that I've looked at and saying, okay, I'm going to incorporate that and apply that to my workout routine, then I started seeing more muscle growth. More weight is not always better. You need to take into consideration, what are you trying to go for? And for the people that are like, oh, more is always better when it comes to hypertrophy, more is not always better. There's a point of diminishing return. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that and talk to the fellow warriors, men and women out there that are looking to improve their physique, to gain and build more muscle, reduce body fat, and so on and so forth. And I thought this was a really interesting tidbit of information. Now, in that study, I highly suggest that you write down that link, and I'll try to post that in the comments section. I think I still got that. Yep, still do. I'll post that link in the comments section so that you can read it. But it talks about a variety of other things as well. It talks about the search criteria, the meta-analysis, the discussion. It talks about frequency, intensity of lifting, the contraction type, repetition duration, exercise order, time of day, periodization, blood flow restriction. You know, it goes over a lot of interesting information, but that information on the repetition of the duration of a repetition, you can get into junk, and more is not always better, or longer is not always better. So anyway, I thought I wanted to pass that on to you all, and hopefully you find that useful. Try it. You know, if you haven't done slow negatives before, think of it this way. If you're doing an exercise and you're doing that curl and you come up, hold that contraction, squeeze it for 1 to 2 seconds, and then take, you know, like 4 seconds to go down. Because studies have shown that you can get hypertrophy as you're coming up, but you can also get it on that slow negative. So why not get the best bang for your buck? Do a slow negative and you can reap some additional hypertrophy by doing that. I mean, it's just another tip and trick that I wish I learned decades ago. Now you don't have to waste decades. You can take this information and run with it. So anyway, Warriors, thanks for stopping by and checking that out, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace. Good stuff. Good stuff indeed.